back to another episode of Plug and Pay, the talk show where we bring you the latest and greatest of global payroll. I'm Angelique, Payzar's head of content, and today I'm here with our head of service delivery, lovely Max. Hi, Max. How are you doing?
Good, because, well, when we were pre-discussing this, you told me that finally Barcelona has some rain and the Netherlands has
that makes you happy.
Sunshine. that actually makes me personally happy. Also, because you need the rain over there.
True.
Anyways, but enough about the weather. I think that's something you can always take with you, as with Global Payroll. So it's great. We are back.
Definitely. And today with us, we have a very special guest and actually a good friend of ours. So for those of you who don't know, this is Pierre. Hi, Pierre. Pierre Thenes. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I have been practicing. So Pierre is a global payroll leader and also a consultant at his consultancy, Payroll Flow. And he actually joined us for our live panel discussion on bringing payroll into the 21st century. If you haven't listened to that discussion, it's definitely worth it. And last month, he also joined us in person. We had the honor to meet him at our Amsterdam networking event. And so he's a good friend of ours. Thank you so much for joining us again, Pierre. For those of our listeners who don't know you, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you, Angelique, for the presentation and for inviting me again. I'm really glad to join this call and having another payroll discussion. So my name is Pierre, born and raised in France. This is also where I started my payroll journey, first working for PwC as a French payroll expert, and then moved to Amsterdam already 7 years ago. And I became international or global payroll expert. And I had a variety of positions in the payroll industry. And then 2 months ago, I decided to create my own payroll consultancy company that I called Payroll Flow. And I'm really enjoying it so far.
That's great. Yeah, I was just about to ask you, I was going to say this is a really exciting time for us to chat with you because of this new development. So tell us a little bit about Payroll Flow.
Sure. So in terms of services, I'm supporting companies in defining their global payroll strategy or supporting payroll implementation, whatever it can mean, because you can have change of payroll provider, you can have implementation of new payroll system, integration of HRIS system with the payroll engine. So any implementation I can really help and support that, and also defining a roadmap, in changing the operating model or implementing new ways of working. And last, but it's really a topic that is close to me is adding a bit of automation, like modernize the payroll process. How we can leverage automation, so it can be RPA, it can be macros, it can be different tools that are available to remove this manual, repetitive load of activities that usually payroll professionals are busy with. So I would say these are the three pillars that Payroll Flow can support companies in: defining the global payroll strategy, supporting payroll implementation, and last, helping with automation.
Sounds good, Pierre. And I guess this reminds me of my time that I studied psychology, Pierre, because flow, of course, is actually a theory that comes from psychology, from a guy who I have, well, learned by heart how to pronounce his name. If you Google it, it will be difficult, but it's Michal Csikszentmihalyi. I believe he's a Czech psychologist who actually did all the studies around flow. And what I always say is that the best way to describe it is if you drive your car. That's typically when you're in a flow, because you don't think about how to drive or what to do. You're just in the zone. And I guess with your consulting, everybody working in payroll will be in such a flow here. So I think it's a great name. But that's not something we're going to talk about today, because we actually, I did a poll, I think a couple of weeks ago, that were focused around which skills the global payroll professionals will need now, in the future, and perhaps also in the past. And you and Angelique helped me come up with some character profiles for these skills to make it a little bit more exciting. But maybe for those who have missed the poll, of course, can't imagine. And if you've missed the poll and you've missed the blog that we've written about it, you've really not been online for the past weeks. But hey, in the unlikely event people didn't read it, Angelique, can you recap those characters for us?
Yes, of course. Yes, that was actually really fun. All of us three together brainstorming these ideas. And the ones we confirmed were Sherlock Holmes, which was the detailed focused payroll professional. Fred, which again, if you don't know, is our Payzar's friendly payroll pro character that joins us in our events, and he is a status quo breaker, so he challenges the status quo. We then have Frodo Baggins, who is a curious and adventurous payroll pro, and finally we have C3PO, communication master. So from these four, we did have a clear winner, which was Sherlock, detailed focused, which came in at 67%. So I don't think any of us will be too surprised that detail focus won. But it was interesting that the second place was Fred with 16%. So it was really nice to actually see some of the comments as well from people who were saying, you know, I need a Fred in my team. I need someone who challenges the, you know, thinking inside the box. We've always done it this way kind of approach. So that was really great to see. Fred's message has been being spread. And then we also had 9% for Frodo and 7% for C3PO. So I want to ask you, Pierre, how would you vote? How did you vote, or how would you have voted, and why?
So detail-oriented, it's an obvious one for payroll specialists, right? And professionals that are processing payroll. That's the most important quality you must have. But I think I selected the second one, which is a status quo breaker, because often you see the payroll process and the payroll team being a bit behind in terms of technology and in terms of ways of working. Because there is a bit of resistance to change with payroll being a very highly sensitive process, which, you know, if you change anything and it goes bad, it's going to be very bad. So usually payroll professionals are a bit skeptic or cautious about change. And I believe it's important to have this mentality on looking for improvement opportunity, right? So how we can do this better, how we can we remove the manual data manipulation we are currently doing. So the status quo breaker, which was Fred, I think is my choice to have this, you know, openness for change.
No, that's a good answer. So kind of a balance between the two, but if you have to choose, go with Fred. So I'm curious, what about you, Max? You're the Fred one who came up with Fred here, but how would you vote? And I know that you have a different opinion whether it's a payroll specialist or a payroll manager. So please explain.
Yeah, as I was actually at breakfast with the children before getting them to school, I thought about our little podcast today and the different skills and my experience. So in my room, I have a printer, Angelique and Pierre, and I have a ruler. And that's for a very specific reason, because in one of my last jobs, we had an EOR, so an employer of record, to manage the entities and the payrolls for us for about 20 countries, 100 employees. So small volumes, test out the market. Those were salespeople. With salespeople, of course, there's commission-based pay. Now, we had commission inputs via Excel, which we received, which we then had to manually, one by one, enter in this not to be named EOR provider. Then we had to reconcile those actual manual entries with the source Excel sheet. And I was doing that on screen, but I have glasses, but I couldn't see anything anymore. I got completely dizzy. So then I decided, for that specific reason, to buy a printer to print the input, print the output, have a ruler, go line by line, and actually reconcile everything. So that made me be a Sherlock. I had to be a Sherlock. I also had to be a Frodo, because I was curious and adventurous, because I had to actually find out, how am I going to do this? I have to be resourceful. I've tried screens. The data models didn't align from just an employee number in this system, another employee number in another system. So VLOOKUPs couldn't work. So I said, let me go old school. Right, let's do that. But then the Fred in me was going to say, this is ridiculous. It's freaking 2023. I need to buy a printer and a ruler to reconcile input versus submission, and then also output versus submission. So I said, I am not going to deal with this SHIT anymore. So the friend in me started conversations with both our input guys from the commissions team saying, I don't want spreadsheets anymore. And the EOR provider, I want more automation, at least uploads and the same data model from an employee ID perspective. But then I also had to communicate this change because I'm not their parents. Just like my children, I sometimes enforce a change and they accept it because of a hierarchical role. So I also had to bring out the C3PO in me because at my commission teams, I had to have a different conversation, a different relationship. And with the EOR provider, I also had to have a different relationship, especially also with my team members. Because although I was a global payroll manager, I just couldn't ask in 2023 for my team members to buy a printer and a ruler and reconcile. So I just had to go and roll up my sleeves and do it myself. So I guess that's my long answer, Angelique.
So a combination of all of them is what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
you scapegoating out of the vote.
Yeah, because nobody's just a Sherlock, right? Because Sherlock himself is also curious and adventurous. He's also entrepreneurial, but of course, one skill is typically more prominent at a person. But if you look at your team, and Pierre, you've managed global teams, if you would only have Sherlocks, you would never drive change. If you would only have Frodos, you would never deliver a payroll, right? So you always need a mix of it,
balance,
I think.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, especially with the example of Sherlock, because for those of you who like Sherlock, he needs to go into his mind palace in order to be able to solve these things, you know? So he actually works alone. Whereas in global payroll, you need to collaborate. So it's true that you do then need a bit of the communication master here and the other one there.
Yeah, who's Dr. Wilson in the payroll team? The companion of Sherlock.
Watson.
Yeah.
Watson. Yeah, who I don't know. You guys are the ones who have been in payroll teams. You tell me. Who is your handy sidekick in payroll?
I think it changes your situation. So it can be the audit team that helps you pushing forward a business case for implementation of your system. It can be the HR ops team to help you having the input versus output or input validation done in automated way. And it can be also the finance team in the post-payroll activity being more streamlined and having a real partnership. So I think your Watson will change upon your situation.
I played a lot of Dr. Watson roles, Angelique, especially earlier in my career, where I had the leaders drive change, but then the other end, like the stakeholders that Pierre mentioned, HR or audits, were typically detail focused. And then my leader wasn't too detail focused. So I joined the calls for those 1 or 2 questions that are very detailed and my beloved Sherlock or Fred or Frodo wasn't able to answer. And I was always on mute, but those 1 or 2 questions, I got off mute and said, that's an irrelevant question, or this is the actual answer. So that was kind of maybe the 5th role, like a Dr. Watson role, to keep the other ones sane and to not lose face and give a helping hand, even when they sometimes didn't realize to need it.
True. And actually, I think there was a few people on the poll itself who gave their opinions of whether there was a 5th one or whether there should be a little bit different, which is interesting to see that everyone kind of got involved with their ideas. And one of them actually said that obviously Sherlock, in global payroll, we don't have the time that Sherlock has to solve his mysteries. That's the thing that you're always kind of looking for more, no time. So their suggestion was actually Inspector Gadget, because you have obviously the inspector side, the detail oriented, but then also who is able to know when to use tools and technology. So what do you think about this 5th idea of an Inspector Gadget, Pierre?
It's a funny one, because from what I remember from my childhood, it was not the one solving the mystery, but it was a little girl, right, doing all the work. But yeah, a good one. But I think it goes together with a thread, looking for alternative solution, looking for tools, a status quo breaker, right? So the Inspector Gadget provides the tools, but then you need to also change the status quo to have the tool being enabled, right? That you are able to utilize these tools within your environment. Yeah, I like it as well, but I think there is a bit of an overlap with Fred.
And I wanted to ask you, now that you've kind of changed a little bit your role from the last time we spoke to a consultant, how do you think the skills for a consultant are similar or different from an internal payroll manager?
So I have a short consultant experience, but from what I experience is it's quite different. The point of view, the ways of working, the service you are providing, because you are an outsider. So then you are not dealing with the same setup and same challenges. So I would say, being a consultant, you are more, you need to focus more on communication, because the thing is, the clients you are working with, they are already aware that payroll is not where it should be, or they are, they want to implement changes, they want to streamline the process, they want to implement new tools. So they're already aware of the challenges and the issue. And as a consultant, you are more there to deliver a solution. So it's a different perspective. So you don't really need to change the status quo, because the status quo is already changed by the client, and you are there to help them deliver a solution. So I would say, as a consultant, you are more C3PO, more a communication master, because you need to connect with different stakeholders to address, the change that the company is facing, but also to deliver a solution and a roadmap, and how we are going to transform payroll from the current state, which is not ideal, to a future ideal, streamlined, automated process. So I would say consultant is more on the communication style.
Good. Well, this brings back makes sense. My consulting days, Pierre. Sorry, Angelique. I had this guy once, and I was at PwC. You worked at PwC as I think in payroll. I worked on in consultancy, employment tax related consultancy. There was one guy. His name was Mark Schell. Mark, I'm giving you the credits, just if you're listening. He came up with the concept. It was very simple, elegant, but brilliant at the same time. It was an inside bubble, which meant the organization sits within its own box, right? And knows there's challenges, but isn't able to solve it, so seeks outside help. Then the outside comes as a consultant like Pierre or what I were at the time, to give that outside perspective. And when you have inside, so the organization, outside, the consultant, it leads to a third bottle, which is inside. But one would, without the other, would never lead to insight. So I think that's kind of how to phrase the different relationships between a customer, consultant, and an end result.
Yeah, and sometimes you really need this third party view on the situation, because if you are suffering from an inefficient process, you tend to overcomplicate what needs to be done, or you don't know where to start, or there are so many challenges that you are a bit overwhelmed with everything. So sometimes you need an outsider to provide insights on prioritization, what you should fix first.
Yeah, it definitely takes a team. Literally, you don't just need two perspectives, but the more insight you can get, the better. So speaking of perspectives, I want to change up the flow a little bit of how we do these podcast episodes, and I want to ask you guys 5 quick fire questions. These are this or that. So, number 1, in the office or remote? Max?
Remote.
Remote.
Okay. Number 2, early bird or night owl?
Both.
This or that, not this and that.
So I'm switching to becoming more early bird.
Okay. Next one, Slack or Microsoft Teams?
Slack.
Slack.
France or the Netherlands?
The Netherlands.
The Netherlands, I would say. Because
Sorry,
I don't want to get kicked out.
Residency denied. Okay, next one is to-do lists. Yes or no?
No.
Yes.
Okay. And last one, if you could swap jobs with anyone for a day, who would it be?
Taylor Swift.
Oh. That's a good one.
But you just swap jobs, not bodies. So that's good with you.
Yeah, honestly.
Then you
Okay. Well, you're already in the pinks. I can envision it up there.
Oh wow.
Well, while you're thinking, Pierre, I can give my answer while you're thinking. So I don't have a specific person, but my answer would be a payroll professional, because that way I could get way more insight into what you guys go through. I've obviously heard so much about it, but I would love to work a day in the life of a payroll professional, just one day, and see what it's like.
So I would say a ranger at a Kenyan national park. So then I can spend the day outside, taking care of protecting elephants, lions.
That was unexpected. Okay. And last question, what do you think a Kenyan park ranger, what skills do you think they would need to have that would also be relevant to payroll, since we're talking about skills today?
You're getting all the hard questions, Pierre.
Well, you're free to answer too, Max. I'm curious. I feel like there's so many transferable skills in payroll that probably apply to many people. So let's think. How?
So diplomacy, I think, would be one. That you need to be very diplomatic in with tourists that want to go really close to the animals, but they need to keep their distance. And also with payroll, you need to be very diplomatic with your stakeholder and create a partnership. So I think that's one transferable skill.
Definitely. I was also thinking like risk and controls.
Yes.
Like you need to be good at risk management because you have a lot of potential high risks. Any idea, Max, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think the stakeholder piece, right? You would probably have a lot of different animals there. And as we know, all the different stakeholders could be a different beast altogether.
Very true. Okay, great. Well, thank you guys for answering my weird questions today. And thank you, Pierre, for joining us and telling us more about Payroll Flow. So I think this is going to be a really interesting one for all our viewers to, first of all, learn about payroll skills and also know where to come if they need help with consultation, strategy, implementation. You guys know where to come to Pierre. So before we wrap up, anything else to add for today, Max?
No, not really. I think there's just so much to talk about in global payroll that we probably run out of time if we continue to talk. But do make sure that you like and subscribe to content. It's easy to flow with payroll with a podcast on. I can tell you from experience, I always listen to my podcasts while doing payroll or music for that matter. Now you know my little guilty pleasure is actually Taylor Swift, because her complete concert is on Disney Plus. Of course, no advertising here, but then I could easily switch to a Rammstein concert as well. But anyways, maybe one day you'll see me in a stage somewhere in San Francisco singing Romeo and Juliet to 50,000 people. But in the meantime, just make sure you keep evolving payroll and like and subscribe to our channel. I think it's Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, but of course also YouTube. And Pierre, as always, merci beaucoup for joining us.
Merci pour l'invitation.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.